Hi, everyone. I'm Doug Black, editor-in-chief at Inside HPC. And today we've assembled three HPC experts looking ahead to next week's ISC 2022 conference in Hamburg. And we're looking to them for guidance on some of the more important or interesting sessions, keynotes, and maybe some of the news and topics of discussion that they think will be noteworthy coming out of the conference. And so we have with us Katie Antypas. She is Division Deputy and Data Department Head at NERSC, which is the National Energy Research Scientific Computing Center. We have Earl Joseph, CEO of HPC industry analyst firm Hyperion Research. And with us again is Addison Snell, CEO and co-founder of industry analyst firm Intersect 360 Research. Thank you all for joining me.
Thanks, Doug, for having us.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Great. So, Addison, let's start with you. Looking at the top 500, which is always a big source of news, ISC week. What are the expectations for exascale in the new list?
Well, the big thing that we're all waiting for really is Frontier at Oak Ridge National Labs. And I don't have any inside knowledge of this at all. Maybe we can pump Katie and see if she has some. So it's all been conjecture right now. I had a lot of us had initially talked about whether the Frontier supercomputer would make it on the SC21 November top 500 list. It didn't. And I think that's fine, especially with supply chain issues being what they were. I think there were a lot of reasons why we didn't see Frontier on that list. But now I think there is a lot of anticipation that we'd like to see a U.S. exascale system up there. And it will really be the first exascale system on the top 500 list. China is widely reported as having in fact, publicly known now to have two exascale class supercomputers, but they haven't been submitted for top 500 runs. So we still don't have an exascale system on the top 500 list. And I think we'd like to see it up there. It is not 100% to me whether or not Frontier will be there or not. I think if I had to bet, I would bet yes, not no. But there's enough anticipation that I think it's not clear, and we're waiting for the big reveal on Monday in Hamburg. If it's not there, then I think it would start feeling late, that system, and it would bring Aurora back into the conversation about what'll be on top of the top 500 list come November. But I'm really interested in what Earl and Katie have to say on that topic as well. Yeah.
Katie, please jump in. If you have
well, I think it's fair to say we are all looking forward to seeing that list, and are hoping, keeping our fingers crossed for a U.S. exascale system. And maybe I'll leave it at that.
Earl, tell us your insights in this area.
Sure. So I'm going to pass on the Frontier comments, but to me, the list is amazing. In particular, there's some new systems that are fascinating, that more of these will show up. The Penguin system at Facebook, for example, doing the metaverse is just fascinating. Yeah. What Tesla's doing is just tremendous too. So there's a lot of new types of applications, new types of buyers building truly gigantic systems. And as Addison said, the other interesting part is whether or not the Chinese decide to post or not post will be fascinating, because there's a number of systems there. And for whatever reason, either it's politics or maybe they aren't fully accepted yet, but it'll be fascinating to see what happens on the list.
Yeah, I ran a story last week about exascale in China. And, there might be a growing perception that China's kind of pulling away a little bit, because at least their first exascale system has been up and running for more than a year. And so, that could be a pretty hot topic next week.
So I agree, it'll be a hot topic. Pulling away is a big comment. Ahead, certainly. Pulling away, I don't know about that. These things do tend to leapfrog each other. Let's see what happens.
Yeah. Well, one of the sources said, China could have 10 exascale systems in place by 2025. That's been denied and disputed, so I don't know. But now Now, Katie, I think you have
Well,
some
if I could
thoughts.
add, I
Please,
agree that
please.
China by 2025 will likely have 10 exascale machines. We're tracking the different sites, different locations, and by 2025, an exascale machine by itself is not going to be that unusual. So I
No.
think there'll be at least 10 out there in China.
Okay, great. Now, Katie, I think you have some thoughts about the ISC agenda. Is there anything that surprises you, in the program lineup?
Yeah, whenever I look at these conference programs, I think about what am I expecting to see, and then what deviates from that. And to me, when I was looking over the ISC program and the schedule, I saw a lot about managing the HPC software stack, configuring HPC systems. I mean, these were sessions from talks to panels to BOFs. And I think that is going to be an interesting area that we all need to focus on, because to be honest, I think we were a little bit stagnant as a community for a while in the ways that we were deploying software and managing our systems. And now we just see a lot of different innovation coming out in this areas. And so there's different communities trying to figure out, hey, how should I manage my next generation system? How should we get software on the system? And so that sort of struck me as just how much of the agenda had things about like build your software system with SPAC, how to use containers on HPC software system, how to do cluster management in this new way. And that's something I hadn't seen as much in the years past. Of course, also all over the agenda is the interface and interplay between AI and HPC, but I was expecting that. And so the software angle was something I thought was different and interesting.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Certainly for the exascale computing project, a big piece of that budget was put into the software side. So that would be a common theme, I guess, too. Now, Addison, today at your market update, you talked about this unified theory. I mean, software is playing a big role there, I would assume.
Well, yeah, what you're referring to there is we tried to provide a unified look at the complete interrelationship of total data center spending to be inclusive of high performance computing, AI, cloud, hyperscale, and on-prem enterprise spending. And I think exactly that notion of things are migrating where we've got a lot of hybrid workloads for both high performance computing and AI. The native or pure AI spending that's in no way associated with any kind of HPC that we're starting to monitor now, both on-prem and in the cloud, is still mostly cloud. It started almost entirely cloud, and the hyperscale companies, of course, do a lot of their own AI spending that we're not even really counting here. But talking about these hybrid environments, I think that really fuels exactly what Katie's talking about. Is now you need to have that conversation about workload management, containerization, DevOps, data ops. How do you move all of this stuff? Because really a lot comes down to skills and management. That's not as simple as waving a wand and saying, well, put it in the cloud and then I don't have to worry about it. The skills in managing all of those workloads, I think, is going to be a really important part of the conversation as you move towards scalability.
Yeah, great stuff. Now, Earl, over to you. What are you looking forward to seeing and learning, especially at ISC next week?
Well, there's a number of things. First of all the new European initiatives and the 4-pillar strategy that the EU is putting in place is just fascinating. Also want to get updated on the SciPearl and NPI processor initiatives in Europe and how that's progressing, because they're moving much more quickly than originally expected. They're doing a lot of partnerships, getting a lot of IP technology, so they don't have to reinvent the wheel. So it's just fascinating there. As Katie mentioned, the AI portion is strong and we're tracking that closely, but also quantum computing. I'm amazed at how many talks there are on quantum computing. Europe is incorporating that in its overall strategies very heavily. And then the other part is all about power and sustainability. Europe is really struggling the most with power and, the power requirements, and, the rest of the world is trying to catch up with that. But we're trying to better understand, how you can look at systems, design systems, perhaps track the power requirements. I was fascinated with NVIDIA's announcement that, the new NVIDIA processors, GPUs coming up, they're going to be 500 watts to 750 watts per processor. Well, when I first hear that, I say, well, it's got to be liquid cooled likely, not in every case, but a lot of them. But, the efficiency is getting better, but at the same time, the total net power requirement is just escalating. So learning about how different vendors and different users are addressing that issue will be fascinating.
Yeah, very, very big stuff. Now, Addison, you've noted that we're back in person at ISC for the first time in 3 years. How is the pandemic continuing to impact HPC, would you say?
Well, it continues to impact a lot of things, and first and foremost, I think is just the tragic loss of life. We're HPC and AI and hyperscale analysts, right? So we tend to look at the market effects, but be irresponsible not to acknowledge that the primary effect is tragic loss of life worldwide, and it's continuing. We're not past it. We're getting to a point where we feel safe enough to meet in person. And I think that's great because it's a community driven industry. There are going to be people I haven't gotten to see in a couple of years. And those connections are important. It has had a significant market effect. When we came out with a market forecast last year, which was our first pandemic affected market, we were forecasting for a short-term recession, and we put a lot of work into this model that shows the effect where you get pent up demand that's deferred and not canceled, then you get a big rebound, and then it oscillates in the couple of years. And the thing is, we've lost that. That didn't happen because we went through 2021 and still had the pandemic, and we were missing rebound, supply chain issues. So we did claw back some growth and, single digit growth, but nothing like the rebound that we were hoping to have. And we've gotten to where we've lost a year and a half worth of market growth. So we are returning to that normal growth path, but what we're forecasting now for 2026 is still $1 billion below what we had forecast a year earlier in 2025. So what we had been forecasting as short-term deferment really became more long-term cancellations of different projects, not across all industries. Government sector had good growth in 2020 and then kind of flattened out in 2021. Some commercial industries like biosciences, pharmaceuticals, that's continued to invest, and you could see why in a pandemic. The most interesting one to me, looking at HPC spending, was entertainment, which got clobbered in 2020 when people stopped going to the movies, and you had a lot of loss of revenue, people deferring feature films. But then that industry pivoted in 2021, did a lot of streaming, a lot of things that were digital, and did have a rebound within the calendar year. It's not the biggest HPC vertical market. Most of it is more properly counted in hyperscale, but we talked about that in our forecast webinar about how we did see a rebound in entertainment in 2021. It's just so variable market by market and segment by segment, up and down, and by region, what it looks like. It's been a lot of work to really track all of those effects.
Yeah, I don't know if Earl and Katie have other thoughts on that, but I guess HPC in the cloud certainly, if you benefited,
It's
if you will,
huge
from,
growth
yeah,
in the cloud,
yeah,
and I don't need to dominate the answer there, but yeah, the cloud does well with uncertainty and served a real a real value in the market for providing that over the last couple of years. Sorry to
Yeah, I think
interject again.
it's very nice to see some conferences coming back in person. I mean, when you look at HPC as a discipline, it is an interdisciplinary field, and I think about what makes NERSC as a facility work. It's the fact that we have people that understand how water flows through the pipe, and we also have staff that understand how Python works on GPUs and how to optimize it. And you need people at all layers in order to make movement and advancements in this field. And I think that kind of discussion really can happen at conferences when the scientists are meeting the architects and the designers. So I think it's fantastic to see some of these workshops and meetings coming back in person.
yeah, no doubt. It'll be great for everyone to be back together again. Now, Earl, what would you say are some of the major opportunities and maybe concerns likely to be addressed, at the conference next week?
Right. So I think some of the opportunities is, for example, last year Europe showed very substantial growth. Atos had a wonderful year last year. As far as our tracking in 21, Europe grew by 14%. The rest of the market grew by 9%, but Europe did quite a bit better. So the opportunities in Europe are very strong in the sense that the Europeans have decided to install a lot of what I'll call medium-sized supercomputers across a large number of countries, as opposed to putting a lot of money in early exascale. They're putting exascale systems a couple of years later and then populating a large number of different countries. So that's just fantastic to see the science being spread around and the HPC spread around much more across Europe. The other big opportunity is in the cloud portion of the market. Last year we picked up in our surveys the first time that on-prem money was going to be spent on the cloud. Now, you always saw one-off examples here and there, but roughly 44% of the sites plan to take some of their money on-prem and spend in the cloud. And we feel that's a fundamental change in buying behavior. Now, it's not that sites are shutting down what they're doing on-prem, because on-prem continues to grow well. We expect cloud to grow by about 23% next year, in the year that we're in right now. So that's going to be just amazing. The biggest concern we have, though, is related to HPC talent. Right now, we're an aging workforce, and there aren't as many people coming into the workforce as are exiting. And that trend is colliding with the complexity of the systems. We've already talked about some of it, but when you try to incorporate AI in the middle of traditional mod sim, or putting mod sim into AI, and then doing the mixed workload, how much is on-prem in the cloud, and to manage which app goes where, and then incorporating all the new big data technologies. But then on the hardware side, the number of processor growth is just staggering. There's going to be unique processors in Europe. There's unique processors in China, Japan, US, on both the processor side and GPUs. So the biggest threat right now I see in the industry is this lack of talent to actually implement everything. And as Katie said, on the software side, applications have to be redesigned, reconfigured, but then even at the system level, how do you manage a much more complex system environment, and at a much larger scale? So there's a lot of opportunities and challenges out there.
Well, now, Addison and Katie, do you have ideas on what's the answer to that problem? Is it certainly it's greater diversity and drawing on greater and wider groups of people to draw in new talent, but I would imagine it's also bringing increasing automation to some of the functions that otherwise would need a high degree of training and skill.
Yeah, I think this is a hard one. I will say for us at NERSC, probably one of our greatest challenges over the next few years is going to be staffing up in our NERSC 10 system that's expected to come in the 2026 timeframe. We're anticipating that we're going to need to do more of the technology integration ourselves, and so because of this more complex environment. I mean, I think it's going to be fantastic for the scientists, right? If they can think of being able to compose their workflows, being able to flexibly and dynamically allocate some of these system resources. I mean, I think there's going to be a real ability to map scientific workflows to these new types of HPC systems. But we're under no illusion that this is not going to take a lot of effort to do it. And I mean, to be honest, I think we're going to be in for a struggle right now, because a lot of organizations and companies, industries, and labs are all trying to hire people with the same skill. I'm not sure that we can automate our way out of some of this innovation and this technology integration that we need to do. And so I think we want to try to bring in people that are close to the systems and computer science and train them up. We've had success in converting our users to NERSC staff if they get the bug, but I think this is going to be a real challenge for the industry going forward.
Yeah, Earl hit it right on the head, talking about staffing as a major challenge. And Doug, you mentioned diversity. If the talent pool we're going to draw from is going to be all white men, not only is that the wrong thing to do, but there just aren't enough of them either. I mean, this is something that we need to bring a lot of skill into high performance computing and AI and diversify the talent pool for all kinds of reasons. We had great response from the whole HPC community around the Winter Classic Invitational Student Cluster Competition we did that was outreach to historically Black colleges and universities and Hispanic serving institutions who have been underrepresented at the student cluster competitions on the conference circuit. And I'm delighted that we were able to just announce today we'll have at least one and probably two teams made up of those students from across the different schools at the SC22 student cluster competition. But I mean, as much as I love student cluster competitions, that's a drop in the bucket for the kind of draw that we need to keep doing to build STEM and parallel programming, everything to bring talent into this industry. And this is another area where hyperscale has a major effect, because you get 10 companies at the top of hyperscale who are major draws of talent pulling young people into their companies, and there's just fewer people to go around. So that's another way that hyperscale has a major effect on HPC and AI.
Yeah, yeah. Now, Addison, staying with you, you had some thoughts about the keynote being on digital twins, and some of your thoughts about the metaverse and its relationship to supercomputing.
I mean, I don't know how many thoughts I have on it other than I'm really interested. Metaverse has suddenly come up as this major topic. It's something that is more directly AI related than traditional HPC related, but it drives the use of a lot of high performance components. It's an adjunct of high performance computing. I think it's hyperscale related. I think it's an interesting topic. And when you get to the notion of digital twins in general, it is a proximity market to a lot of traditional high performance computing in, for example, manufacturing or other digital product development. So, I think it's going to be a fascinating topic. It's one that we definitely want to keep our finger on the pulse of what's going on with it. But it's interesting to me because it's outside the realm of traditional high performance computing. So I don't know. I'm interested. What do the others think?
At NERSC, we have about 1,000 different projects and 8,000 different users, and about 30 to 40% of these teams are now sending us data from experimental facilities. So think sensors, detectors, telescopes, microscopes. And this is not your traditional HPC workload. So I feel like we're living this now. What I think will be interesting about sort of this talk is to see how those facilities that are running externally start integrating their workflows in with compute, and how they start automating those science lab problems, automating their own labs, and how that gets connected back into HPC. So that's kind of the more practical angle I see on it. I don't know if I can get my head totally around the metaverse or quite yet.
Well, I'm glad you brought it up, Addison, because we did one of these panels for SC last year, and I noted that there was nothing in SC agenda last year that referred at all to the metaverse, and I've got the sense that might have been not the best suggestion from me, but I think it's going to be integrated into, as you're saying, it's sort of a somewhat indirect related workload to HPC, and AI, but increasingly I can see it being infused into those traditional workloads. Now, Earl, is there anything else special you recommend we watch for at ISC next week?
I think a number of things. But one thing I want to mention about the digital twins, which I think is fascinating, and what Katie mentioned with edge technology. The digital twin concept has been around quite a while, but the implementation now has moved to a whole new level. But the interesting thing to us is when the simulation model and the real model may start to merge together some. If you have the same edge data being fed into your real world model and the simulations become more real time, we see an actual merging of the two, which I think will be fascinating. But at ISC, the main thing that I always look forward to is to meet with everyone and learn, face-to-face discussions, have conversations about how science is advancing, what's working, best practices. So it's really that one-on-one ability to talk with people, get together. And as everyone else mentioned, it's been a long time since we've had much of a conference. Supercomputing last year was nice, but the size was dramatically smaller than usual. We're going to hopefully get our user forums up and running in June 21st, 22nd at Oak Ridge. We're having our first face-to-face user forum. So a big part of it is actually to have those conversations live with different people. And if you look at the folks going to ISC, it looks like a very robust and large group of people, which is fantastic.
Yeah, great. Addison, Katie, any other final thoughts?
Looking forward to it.
You look forward to it. Yeah, I'm someone who typically goes to the science talks primarily at these conferences. But what I noticed was that there are quite a few vendor forums, vendor demos that looked really interesting around storage, around cloud, that I think would be cool to go and see.
Okay. Well, thank you all for joining us today. We've been with Katie Antypas, Addison Snell, and Earl Joseph, and hope you have a great conference.
Great.
Thanks, Doug.
Everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, Katie and Earl. Good to see you.